Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Shh. Any approach works. Well, it's good to hear plenty going on. As Jez said, this is the coma slot. So I'm a bit worried about that. So having got you all sat down quite nicely, what I'd actually like you to do is to stand up again. And now this is going to be very uncomfortable for some of you, but could you move around and perhaps just sit with somebody who you don't know quite as well as the people you're sitting right next to? So go and have a mix around. This is about networking. You've got 1 minute. Okay. Okay, well done. Mission accomplished. Fantastic. Right, almost accomplished. Now, I was actually going to get you to do something with the person you're now sitting next to, but I tested it over lunch with some of the Anglian team and concluded it would be beyond your capabilities at this time of the afternoon. So we're not going to do that. So that's just to get a bit of the blood flowing. Just to remind you, those boards to put up your pains and gripes. I can make one conclusion. There's quite a few on there, but not many. So there's not many pains and gripes actually in this space. So please, if you've got pains and gripes, go to the boards. They're out the door here, just sort of behind that wall, and go and put your stickers on there, as you were asked earlier. Pains and gripes. We've got a number of themes coming out already. Data quality, which we touched on in a number of the sessions. That point about NDAs and needing to collaborate much more, which I think the younger contingent is continuing to push us to do that. And the importance of data sharing, but I'm sure there's other pains and gripes that people want to put up there. So please do that, and Bob will reflect on those, I'm sure, at the end of the day. So don't forget to turn off your mobile phones and any other devices that you've got notifying you as to what's going on out there. And please also don't forget to fill in the feedback form, which is in those papers and materials that you had earlier on. So it's been a fantastic programme this morning, lots of great insight, but now we're going to move into the afternoon, talking very much about operational and technical developments, and we start the afternoon with taking action with troublesome DMAs. And perhaps I could just ask the speakers for this afternoon slot to come up and join me on the stage, if that would be all right. Andrew, Courtney and Tom, if that's okay. Thank you. Oh, there's more. Blimey. What a richness, hey? So we've all got troublesome DMAs that we need to tackle. This relates to one of the big challenges in the identified in the leakage route map, and particularly that one around the background leakage that we all know, but also how we go about calming networks, and are we leveraging everything we possibly can, and what other approaches do we need to bring in to help identify what's happening with some of our networks. So we've got 3 presentations bringing us insight into different teams' approaches into that problem of troublesome DMAs. We're going to start with Andrew Blenkhart, the Technical Policy Manager at Northumbrian Water, with a snappily titled presentation from MAL to MABL, or from maximum achievable leakage to minimum achievable background leakage. I'm going to hand over to Andrew in a second. Then at the end of each of the presentations, we'll just pop up here and take questions on Slido or from you in the audience. So over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. I can't quite remember agreeing to do 2 presentations, but here I am again. So we'll give this one a. This is all my own work. So if it's no good, it's all my fault. So from Mal to Mabel, what's really going on? I'm going to kind of talk through some of the activities we've been doing at Northumbrian Water over the last 12 months. Probably nothing too new that I haven't kind of mentioned before, but so it's just some of the experiences that we've had. And I thought I'd start with kind of setting the scene. So current performance and where we operate. And I know a lot of people in this room will be familiar, but I just thought it'd be good to highlight the very distinct regions that we operate in the northeast of England and kind of the Essex and Suffolk regions. So they've got very, very different topographies, got very different networks and water resource circumstances. So yeah, very, very different networks, around 17,000 kilometres in the north, 8,500 in the south. But they do both suffer from troublesome DMAs. I'll comment on that a little bit more in the future. So we're probably a bit of an outlier of the company at the start of this AMP. These are our performance graphs. So you can say we had a really difficult year in the first year of this AMP. It jumped up significantly in both regions, and that tended to be, a lot of that was around the winter outbreak that we had. I think it was kind of around January 2020, had a big outbreak, and that was kind of sustained through the winter period, and we didn't really drive that down until kind of into the following year. So we had poor performance at the start of the AMP, and we've been kind of trying to recover from that ever since. So last year we did much better, and it kind of got us back on that deteriorating trend, but with the 3-year rolling average, that kind of year's performance, that first year's performance is sat in there for the next 2 years. So that's really difficult to accept, that even though you're improving, you're kind of not hitting the performance commitment. Our aim this year is to try and get down towards our year 5 target level. So obviously this is the first year now where it's going to influence our year 5 position on the 3-year average. So if we can get down to where we need to be this year, we'll be looking to maintain that for the next 3 years and hopefully achieve our performance commitments. So I say we had a really challenging first year, improved last, and we were looking at kind of what's the next step change, what's going to get us into the next kind of level of performance where we need to be. So we started to focus on some of these troublesome DMAs, and we probably all got different definitions of what we would class as troublesome or problematic. So I just started to go through the ones that we've used historically and kind of some of the ones we're moving to now. So one of the first ones on there is inoperable DMAs. So if the calculations aren't working, you don't know what the leakage is in there. In a lot of areas, we find that can sometimes kind of give you a high level of leakage. When it's operable, it gives you a high volume of leakage, but then the next week it's kind of inoperable again, and that high level of leakage is carried forward. So that can give us an issue when you find quite a few of these inoperable high leakage areas in the reported figures. So trying to get those operable, understand what's happening is really important. Previously, we kind of used, it was almost like we would do the stop tap bashing. We talked about kind of the listening sticks this morning. That would be our standard approach. So we'll be going around. If we couldn't get that leakage down after 3 surveys, you'd have thought you'd learned by then that it's not working, you need to do something different. So we have some lead leakage technicians that are kind of the best of the best within our company. They're given a little bit more time. They're not kind of targeted in the same way. So they're really trying to do a deep dive within the DMA to understand what's happening, why can't we find it? And they're very good at finding it when it's leakage. But we still have the issue, if it's not leakage, you're never going to find it. So we kind of moving on to the approach, comparing this where MAL, so the minimum achieve level, never gets down to where it should be. So you can do estimates on the number of properties, the length of mains, that kind of thing, looking at where we think this should be. And you're always looking at, no matter how hard we try, we're never getting below a certain point. And it's trying to understand, well, why is that? Is it this really difficult to find leakage, or is it not leakage? So we're prioritizing them to kind of look at them in a different way. The final one I've got on there is some work we've been doing with Invenio earlier this year, and they made us aware of this curly value, we call it. So now, don't ask me what it stands for, but it's a bit like a leakage indicator, I guess the end piece is, which is kind of a product of leakage per property, leakage per length of main. So it's kind of looking at assessment for that size of DMA, what is your expected level of leakage? And you kind of have these values where the average range or a good range would be about 1,000. And then kind of you're looking at your outliers and you're trying to take them from the outside of the graph and bring them down. So again, it's just a different way of looking at the data for the size of that DMA. Something doesn't look right here, and you're trying to prove what that is and kind of reduce the leakage. So we did some analysis to try and understand kind of how much of an impact these DMAs are having on our reported figures. So if we look at kind of the targets that we were hoping to achieve in this AMP, around 20 meg reduction in the north, just kind of using approximate figures, that leakage is within 88 DMAs, so kind of 7.2% of the DMA stock. So if we could sort them out, if we can improve that 7.2%, then that would achieve our leakage target in this AMP. And kind of very similar for Essex, so like I say, completely different region, different background. But if you look at the 10 meg reduction that we were looking to make this AMP, it's in 36 DMAs, almost exactly the same percentage, so 7.3%. So it's really about if we can focus into these DMAs and get these sorted, it's going to have like obviously a significant impact on our performance. The final thing we did when we were looking at categorizing them, so you get different kind of flow categories. So the one where we've got an increasing trend, you're more kind of, I say not sure, but that looks more like leakage. Something's changed, it's deteriorating, so you suspect that is leakage breaking out. And then on the other side, you've got these static night lines. So no matter how many times you get in there, you just can't get below that point, and it just kind of has that flat night line. You can't get it below there. So we try to treat those slightly differently, and we've applied different approaches, and I'll go through some of those in a minute. I've kind of got the inoperable in there at the bottom, which it's kind of needs to be sorted, needs to be operable again, but they never really get involved in these projects because you can't really send a contractor in to go and sort leakage out when we don't really know what's going on. So again, it's just a flag up that those inoperable ones are really important to get sorted out, but they're kind of taken out of the scope of the project that we were looking at. So I'm just going to run through a couple of the kind of projects that we've done. So the first one's FIDO Direct. So kind of just very quickly what it is. It's kind of a lift and shift survey with the FIDO bugs. So FIDO come in, they will do a sweep of the DMA, they'll do all the follow-ups on the POIs, and they will kind of do a blue line mark on the ground and then pass all the information on to Northumbrian Water to then do the repairs. So we did about 15 DMAs between April and July this year. And these are the initial results. So kind of in the 10 DMAs that we did in the north, from about 120 POIs, we ended up with 71 leaks. And in terms of nightline reduction, we achieved a 1.5 meg reduction in leakage over that period, which was really good. In Essex, we did around 5 DMAs, even more POIs for something like a huge amount of POIs there, 228, but only resulting in 39 leaks. But again, the actual leakage reduction was very promising. So kind of 2.5 megs in that 3-month period was really good and comparable with kind of what we were doing with our own technicians. So this is like all additional resource on what we're doing. So I suppose what we're trying to use our existing ALC technicians is to maintain that natural rate of rise, and this stuff is kind of then making the step change to get us down on the target. I would highlight that we don't have any noise logging capability within Northumbrian Water, so we don't have a noise logging team ourselves. We don't have any permanent like fixed acoustic network or anything like that. So for us, this is kind of fills a bit of a gap. I've put one graph on there which showed this leak where we'd surveyed that DMA a couple of times just a couple of weeks before. We hadn't been able to find the leak we were looking for. We got the FIDO surveys done in there, and they were able to find this leak using their acoustic technology. So that was really good. It obviously picks up on leaks that you can't detect through the listening sticks, but I think a lot of companies are a lot further on with their noise logging journey and probably already aware of that. But I think in terms of an additional resource, it worked really well, kind of on a cost per kilometre basis. You kind of hand over the DMAs, find us some more leaks, and that's really good for us. We got some good results from that. Moving on into the Morrison Water Digital Twin. So this was more focused on the kind of those static night lines. I should have said the FIDO was more where we knew there was an increase in trend, so we suspected that was leakage. These ones now we're kind of looking at where we had that flat night line. So I might not be doing a great service here, but my simplistic view of it was a kind of a calibrated hydraulic model with the capability to run multiple scenarios. So we provide all the data in terms of the GIS data, the demand data, and then they kind of deployed some pressure sensors and acoustic loggers within that network as well. And they're kind of looking for anomalies. So the model says there should be this amount of flow in that part of the area, and you're identifying where it's different. If there's an issue, you would then go in and look at what's causing that difference. So is it because there's more leakage than we've got in the model? Is it because there's more demand? Is there something going on in the network? So we only did 2 DMAs early in the year, about February time. We did one in the north, one in the south. Some of the initial results from this, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to pick up the graphics there on the screen, but on the left, was one of the DMAs that we looked at in the Essex region. So that highlighted a point of interest at the bottom of the DMA. When we investigated that further, we found that there was a broken boundary valve that was feeding into a dummy area. So obviously that additional demand was just feeding a different system altogether. We got that kind of booked in for repair, we replaced it, we got it closed, and that dropped the night line by about 3 litres a second. So that was a great result. We also picked up a couple of small leaks on the acoustic loggers, and we got that DMA back down to kind of the historical level. So really good benefit from that one. Slightly different story in the north. So this is a particular kind of student area where we've had kind of a high level of leakage for a number of years. We've had the lead leakage technicians in there, couldn't find anything kind of specifically leakage. So there was a couple of really interesting points. Looking at the model in this detail, it highlighted a couple of properties where we didn't have any of that demand data in NetBase. So there was a swimming baths, which was linked to the next DMA. There was I think there was something else that wasn't on. I think it was a tennis court or something like that, like a sports centre that we just didn't have on the system at all. So it really gets you into that level of detail where you're picking up on stuff in that day-to-day churn of prioritisation where you're relying on the system to tell you where leakage is. If you actually kind of delve into the detail and understand exactly what's happening, then there's some really useful kind of insights in there. They had kind of some really nice kind of mapping of kind of the heat map there of the demand data, and they found that when they modelled it, the water was taking 24 hours to get from one side of the DMA to the other, which was quite amazing. I mean, that was news to us because quite a small DMA. I wouldn't say it was particularly large, and the fact it was going on such a convoluted route around the DMA to get to the far end. It was actually taking a day to get to the far side of the network, and kind of one of the pipes in the middle was critical. You know, if that failed, then we would lose that kind of other half of the DMA. So it's kind of highlighted a couple of things that we need to look at, either for kind of having some more monitoring on there or making sure we follow that up. In terms of leakage, I think we proved that there wasn't any significant leakage in here. Obviously, the reported figures were saying there was a lot of leakage, but we couldn't find anything like significant with the acoustics, say with those changes in the demand data. What we've led to believe, we've kind of done a virtual step test within the model now, and we've isolated kind of a small section of the network, which I think is this particularly student area. So what we think now is kind of because a lot of those properties are rented and the students probably don't have any kind of, I suppose, responsibility. They're in and out of those properties fairly quickly. The landlords probably aren't too bothered because the bills are getting paid. We suspect there's kind of either a higher demand on there or there's like kind of plumbing losses within the properties. So the next stage is we want to try and evidence that and feed that back into the calculations, because obviously until we do that, we don't get a drop in leakage. So we really want to do some more work in there to prove that point, but we're convinced it's not leakage in this area now. That leads quite nicely on to the final one, which is the Invenio stopwatch, which again, I think a lot of people have used now, been involved in the club projects and things like that with the development of the stopwatch device. So we do a full stopwatch survey of the DMA. Every property gets one of the Invenio loggers on, and it's about kind of calculating the demand. I suppose it's a bit kind of until smart meter rollout gets to the point. It's a little bit of a stopgap where we can understand the consumption at all the properties within that DMA. And then that includes any continuous flow. So any leakage on those properties get identified at the same time. So then all those data points are aggregated together. You kind of compare that demand profile with your DMA flows, and you can kind of get some insights from that, whether it looks like it's on the customer side, it's demand, or it's customer side leakage. Is it on the network? Is there any other issues? So quite powerful to get into that much detail. And we did one DMA earlier this year in Essex as an initial proof of concept on this stage. So for the graph there on the left-hand side was the difference between I think the blue line's the Invenio flow data and the red line is our kind of DMA flow. What we found was that there was a kind of a step difference. It just clearly, we were accounting for more flow going in that area than was actually kind of going into the properties. I think we did some further investigations and identify kind of the outlet flow meter, kind of a possible scaling issue. And you know, it's that kind of thing, when you just stop and look at it, it's so obvious, you wonder why you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, aren't you? There's an example there on the right of when we had a burst recently in that area, and the scale of the increase on the inlet flow meter is different to the outlet flow meter. So, you know, we need to do some more work on that, understand where the error is and get that resolved. So that's obviously going to have a big impact if we can resolve that issue. The other thing that they picked up on was kind of 59 properties, about 8% of the properties in that DMA had a continuous flow. So these have been passed on to our customer leakage team to kind of tackle that customer side leakage. I don't know if you can quite read the table in the bottom right hand corner, but it kind of breaks that down into what was customer usage, what was this kind of continuous flow, and what's the network leakage. So the profile they've got on there is a higher kind of estimate than what we're currently applying from our average models. So again, it's kind of, you do it, work out a company value and apply that as best you can to the DMAs based on the property type. But when you get into the detail of it, there is a likelihood that the customers are using different amount of water than what we're actually applying in our models. So that was really good insight, and we just need to make sure we feed that back through the calculations and get that off the reported figures now. So some really good stuff. And this is where we want to link up with what I was saying before on the digital twin. Now that digital twin approach has highlighted an area where we suspect like a smaller section of the DMA is causing the issue, we're now looking to put like the stopwatch devices just on that section so that we can prove that. Once we get that evidence, that enables us to put it in the calculations and kind of feed it all the way through. So it's kind of starting to link some of these projects together as well, kind of how they can complement each other. Final conclusions. So I think everything's been successful to date, and the kind of been proof of concept, and now it's about how we take that forward. We've got another 10 FIDO surveys that we're going to be progressing in the north. I think they're due to start in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping, obviously, to get a similar result. Another couple of megs would be great from that work. We have raised an order for 14 digital twins. So we're going to do 10 more in the north and 4 in the south. Some of that's part funded through the innovation team. So that's good. And any extra we can contribute towards the leakage kind of challenge. So we're hoping to do, with that original DMA, we're going to do the follow-up with the stopwatch devices in that area to see if we can bottom that one out and really get the benefit from that. And kind of on a side thing, we're bringing in some in-venue kind of technicians just to help us with those curly DMAs. So where they've identified there's an outlier, we're looking to kind of hand those DMAs over as a bit of like, you go in and you own them and come back and get us kind of back to the area that they should be for that size of DMA. So it's almost kind of just handing those over to the contractor to deliver the leakage reductions. So I think I've run through that very fast. I don't know if I'm ahead of time or not, but if right, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So are there any questions? Any questions from the audience? We haven't got any come through on Slido. Gent in the middle there. Microphone is on its way to you.
Oh, hi, Ian Pemberton from Ofwat. One of the vagaries of the English language is that you can be singular and plural, and this is a plural question, not a singular. But do we think that in 2022, 23, 30 years, 28 years past the publication of managing leakage, it's still acceptable to have inoperable DMAs?
I mean, there is always going to be an element of inoperable DMAs just in terms of the equipment fails and there's that turnaround time. We've had issues getting loggers with the kind of problems with kind of supply chain and things like that. So there is going to be an element of inoperable DMAs. I think there will be that turnaround, but I think it's those long-term inoperables that are never resolved, that just fundamentally don't work as DMAs, or there's something in the calculation that's wrong. I think they're the ones that we really need to kind of get to the bottom of. And like I say, maybe that's just converting them saying it's not a DMA, it doesn't work as a DMA, so that then goes into kind of dummy areas or kind of the other stuff, strategic network or whatever, and then you want to try and get additional coverage elsewhere, set up new DMAs to make sure you're still achieving the 95% coverage. So yeah, it is quite difficult. We went through quite a big program of putting new DMAs in as part of the consistency work, and kind of, it doesn't always lend itself to the network to kind of set them up, but there is kind of a good range. I think some small DMAs can give you issues, really big ones give you issues, so it's different things. But I think there will always be an element of inoperability.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? In the front.
Hi, Paul, Water. Thanks, that was a wonderful presentation, some really good practical stuff there. Great to see that the curly's being used. That was developed during lockdown by Alan Wyatt, and I think it can be quite a powerful tool on there. You talked about having these 3 super duper leakage technicians that go into areas once you've done 3 sweeps and you can't find the leakage. Can you tell us what they do? What special powers have they got? What do they find?
Well, Yeah, I think there's quite a few companies that have a similar approach. I think we'd adapted it from, I think there was a presentation from Anglian a number of years at this conference. So we picked up on the back of that, but I don't think we really supported our technicians with the analyst resource. I think that's what we're really suffering with. We're not doing that upfront work to understand, are we doing the demand wrong? Is the network set up right? So I think that's what we want to get back to. So we talked about this morning, back to basics, get the fundamentals right, that you're kind of calculating it properly and you know it's leakage. In terms of the technicians themselves, like I said, they are very good. They were always good, high-performing technicians, so they were good at finding leaks. And now they've been given, I think it's just that time, so they're no longer constrained to you've got to get in and out and find that leak as quickly as possible. It's about understanding what's happening in there. So they will do a lot more in-depth investigation. They will look at large customers, kind of log in. They have the ability to arrange step tests and things like that, so that we still do an element of step testing. I think there's probably alternative approaches now, like without switching water off. But if it's really, if we're really struggling, we might go to the step test approach. That's the kind of thing, yeah, just kind of the fundamental stuff, I suppose, of doing it well. Yeah.
So last question, gentleman in the middle, very quick, if you would.
Yeah, it's Dominic Cook from WRC. It's just a quick question about the figures that you quoted, about the FIDO logging survey, where you had 228 points of interest, but you only found 39 leaks. So is that 189 dry holes, or is it 189 times of I can't hear the leak? And if so, have there been any follow-up work to try and chase those down to see, if there was a leak there or not?
Okay, so the POIs were just kind of, I suppose, flagged as an alarm on their system of there's something happening here. They then do the follow-up investigations, or the algorithm would tell them which one were leaks or not. So we only got passed over the ones that were confirmed as leaks. So yeah, it's kind of like we're paying for the service to get those leaks, and it found us the additional leakage, which was great in terms of that process, how much time it took them and how many false alarms there was, and that process, that's kind of outside of our control or interest, I suppose. As long as we were getting the results at the end of it, we were kind of happy with the leaks that were found. So I don't think all of them would have been followed up on. There would have been a process within their system that kind of told them which one was leakage and which wasn't. And then, they would do the necessary follow-ups and raise the jobs for us. So
there's a very interesting difference between the two areas as well, which probably was questioned a bit. One, you got a much better correlation.
More in Essex for the number of DMAs. But so that's kind of an instantaneous drop in like 2.5 megs. That's not like on average over the year. That was just over that period. So, when you average it out over the year, it's not kind of a 2.5 meg drop in annual reported figures. It's going to come back again if we don't continue doing that stuff.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Round of applause for Andrew, please. So our next presentation is from SME Water and United Utilities and focuses on analysing DMA leakage using all of the evidence. So I'd like to welcome up Courtney Connor, and then Stuart Maldit is going to be following. So Courtney first. Thank you.
Stuart's coming up to hold my hand. So I first of all have to give you a slight caveat. If I make a very high-pitched squealing noise, normally just one on its own, it's fine, it's a hiccup. If I don't mention them, they will happen. If I do mention them, they probably won't happen now, and you just think I'm a little bit weird. But yeah, those who know me have probably already heard this noise. So we're here to talk to you about using all the evidence and paradigm. So a little bit of background around this. So in United Utilities, we've significantly invested in our acoustic logger fleet. Partly we need to make a step change to help us achieve our 15% reduction this AMP, and we saw that investment would be part of that plan. We've got 60,000 odd loggers across, not odd, but you know what I mean, across 440 DMAs, and it's roughly 17% of our district metered areas. They are helping us to find leaks more quickly. They're helping us to find leaks that perhaps our technicians have struggled to find in the past using traditional techniques. And they're also demonstrating where leakage isn't, which is equally as important as demonstrating where leakage is. Although we're still very much on a journey to optimize the benefits and realize the benefits from our investment, they have helped us to achieve our year 1 and year 2 leakage targets. We won't talk about year 3, but we're all in the same boat, apart from a couple of people, but we won't mention who they are. You can't get all the praise. However, leakage isn't reducing in all of our logged DMAs. So, For those who have gone big and hard, that's maybe not the right expression, but have ventured into the world of acoustic fleets, you'll probably ask yourselves many of the questions that are on the board. So have we got our baseline coverage correct? As you can see, it's a great likeness of me. I asked Stuart to make me a little bit thinner, but that's the best he could do. Have we got our baseline coverage correct? Do we understand our permanent and transient blind spots? Are the loggers working as we expected? Are we analysing the data in the correct way? Are our technicians doing everything they can with their investigations? Are we being effective with our maintenance? Lots of questions, and I'm sure there's many things at play that are still part of our journey of realising the full benefits. However, it might just be a case that there isn't any leakage to find.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to talk to you about Paradigm, which is a concept we've been developing with a number of UK water companies for the past couple of years. The idea is to look at what should be inside a DMA. So what's the component parts of a DMA? If you build it up and then you compare that against the net flow, what does that tell you? So if we start to look at an example, the things that we would expect to find in our DMA, we've got a net flow profile there. We can add on some background leakage. We might have some known bursts that we're waiting to repair. That's on there as well. We can put household consumption in there. So most of the UK water companies have got individual household monitors, cul-de-sac monitors. They've got DMAs that are very specifically a particular household type. So we know how that household type is going to behave. So we can quite accurately predict this is how much household use and this is the shape that we're going to get for it. We can also add in our non-household consumption and our continuously logged users. Again, we can look over extended periods. If we look over a 6-month period, we can get a real good understanding of how our non-household users are going to be behaving. We've got live data for our continuously logged users, so we can put them on. What we're left with is this orange bit, which is our unaccounted for water. So within our DMAs, that could be lots of different things. It could be in some of Andrew's examples, you've got metering errors on your DMAs, you've got areas that aren't tight, so the water's just passing through somewhere else. It could be that it's demand that's not your system. We have been talking a lot in the industry about gap sites, things that aren't coming through into billing. We know we've got billing problems as an industry, so things that haven't had a meter reading for 2-3 years and they just kind of drop out the system, they stop coming through into our reported leakage calculations. There's lots of reasons why we could have stuff. It goes down as reported leakage. The reality is, it could be anything. It could be all kinds of things. What we can then do is we can isolate that unaccounted for water. So if we look at just the shape of that, you can immediately see it's not a flat profile. So it's probably not leakage, or at least not all of its leakage. Actually, there must be some demand elements in that. And again, if we look at that unaccounted for water profile over an extended period of time, throughout the whole of the year, we can see how does it vary. Does it look like a household shape? Does it behave in the way that a household would? Does it behave in the way that a caravan park would? How can we tell what's going on in that area? And that's the insights that we start to get that start to drive what we're doing. So if you have a look at another example of that, so this is an example of a high household DMA. So in this example, you can see there we've got our green bit at the bottom, which is our household consumption. We've then got a small amount of non-household that sits on top, and we've got a large chunk of unaccounted for water there, which is the orange profile. If we drop that down, you can see actually it closely matches the shape and volume of the households. So that tells us actually, well, it could be household use. And what we can do is then apply some hypotheses. So we can then say, well, let's pretend it's household use. Let's make it household and we'll see how it fits. That's great. So I've fudged my numbers and I've got a nice fit that works and it does it. Now the real test is how does it stand up? So we can then run that same process throughout the whole year. In this case, we then put that DMA through Ramadan 2022. So that DMA is a very high Muslim population DMA, significantly affected by Ramadan, very high occupancy. So it's not well represented within the household light use model because it's got particularly large usage. We're going back, we were saying we had sort of 600 litres per property, very high values in there. But you can see in that area, when we run it through our model that predicts what actually we should see that DMA changing during Ramadan, you can see it almost perfectly fits. It's a real good fit. So that gives you confidence that actually that DMA, there isn't leakage there. There's something else going on. Maybe we need to improve what we're doing from our reported leakage perspective. Maybe we need to look at targeting those households, maybe look at water efficiency. We've got a large population in there. So what does that mean in terms of what Paradigm's then delivering? So first of all, it's looking at the DMA integrity issues. So this will very clearly tell us some of the basic, the easy wins. Does that DMA match what's going into it? So is it breached? Is there an obvious meter scaling issue? It allows us to identify that unaccounted for demand. So have we got clearly non-household usage in there? Should we be doing something other than leakage? Because at the moment, those problems sit within our reported leakage. Should we not be maybe putting solutions in there, for example, pressure management to target leakage, when actually it's not going to react to it because it's a demand issue rather than a leakage problem? And looking at leakage reporting issues. So we've identified in that example, we've got a large proportion of household night use in there. Actually, is our household night use model fit for purpose? Rather than spending lots of money on leak detection in that DMA, actually, should we be going and putting some extra cul-de-sacs onto our monitor, making sure it's representative? It gives us confidence to then go and target the DMAs where we know there is definitely a problem. So the model's saying there's definitely leakage in here. We've been in there, we tried to do leakage, maybe some of the other solutions that Andrew's proposing, maybe you go and spend the money and you get those solutions in because you know that you're going to find something. You know that it's worth investing in there. We've got a club project we're running, and on the back of that, we'll be setting up a weekly output, which will give you 2 weeks of, here's what the model was for the past 2 weeks, here's how it matched against what actually happened in that DMA, here's what the prediction is for the next couple of weeks. So you can see how the DMA is changing, you can see whether it's doing what you expected it to do. So as we go through the year, we go into May Bank Holiday weekend, everything goes up. Did it go up by what you expected it to go up by, or has it gone up by a bit more? So making sure we know what's going to happen, and then similarly explaining to our senior stakeholders why reported leakage has gone through the roof, but actually it's not really leakage, but we're not really going to know until next month when we rerun our cul-de-sac monitors and apply our night use again, and we get the real answers coming back through from our reported calculation. In terms of the action, the real benefit is making sure you're putting the right solution into the right DMA, and then justifying the activity and spend. So as we go through the AMP, and we're looking for that reduction in leakage, we need to make sure that we're doing the leakage activities that aren't cheap, those new modern solutions, we're putting them into the DMAs where we're going to get the benefit from.
Back to me. So we're at the beginning of our journey through our paradigm analysis, and so far we've put through a subset of 78 of our acoustically logged DMAs in North Manchester. So this is what the analysis is telling us so far. So 37 of those DMAs are coming out as high household use being their primary problem, not leakage. 17 of those DMAs are coming out with unaccounted for non-household demand as their primary problem and not leakage. You can see a bit of a theme. Just 7 DMAs came out with leakage as their primary problem. And a further 17 either had some data issues or more complex and still require some analysis. So there could be not a clear primary problem in those DMAs, and there's not always an easy answer, as we know. If you exclude the others, the 17, that brings us out at just 11% of our DMAs, with leakage as the primary problem, out of 78 that we've invested in covering with acoustic loggers. Bear in mind, we've got 440. And then if you think about when we get the full analysis for our DMAs, what will that look like over 2,600 odd DMAs? Bit scary thought, quite exciting thought, but it's definitely an insight that we need. So Paradigm has provided us with insight. Leakage is the primary problem in just 11% of those DMAs. We know we now need to dive into our household and our non-household data, something that we know we probably need to do anyway, but actually there's a greater urgency to do so. It's not always straightforward. There isn't always an easy answer or a primary problem. Paradigm's given us confidence. So to prioritize alarms in those DMAs where leakage is that primary problem, to adjust our DMA leakage targets if it's appropriate, and to not respond to every night flow increase just in case. And we do seem to live in a world of, well, just in case it's leakage, we probably should act. And we really do need to move away from that to become more efficient and effective. Paradigm is driving action. So redeployment of our acoustic loggers feels like it's probably something we might need to start doing, given the results from this first subset. Put them in areas where they're actually going to give us a return. And it's driven us to start mapping our kind of knowledges, that's not even a word, knowledge and processes and task instructions to help our analysts actually dive into our non-household and household data, so that we can focus on what the primary problem is in the majority of the DMAs from that subset. So I think we could probably all identify with a quote from Albert Einstein: "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." Now, I'd like to say that's not representative of us in the room, and there's lots of people doing progressive things and innovation and trying new things in leakage, but it does often feel like you're on the hamster wheel of leakage, and I'm sure you probably all identify with that quote at some point in your career, if not daily. So that's why we're taking part in the Paradigm Club project. So we can analyse 10,000 DMAs, and as you can see, we're one of four water companies, to give us that insight, to deliver the confidence, and to make sure that we're delivering the right solution to the right problem. So in summary, Paradigm gives us insight, confidence, and action. The question remains, are you in a position to shift the paradigm?
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So let's open up. Any questions from the audience? Gent over there. I'd be worried, he was very fast off the blocks.
Steve Toombs, Invenio Systems. Does this imply that your leakage is much, much lower than you think it is?
Let's hope so, I think is the answer.
I think there's a mix of problems. So one of the problems is you've got a reported leakage calculation that says, I'll apply my household night use everywhere, and it's okay because it averages out. But that means that you then get pockets of DMAs where it's overestimated and pockets of DMAs where it's underestimated. If you're then trying to use that data to decide where you're going to put leakage, other solutions and targeted solutions, then it's not the right data set to use to prioritize that. So I think that there's more demand in there. I've been speaking to a few people at the conference over the past few days, and there's a few people who are saying, well, we've done this before and it's maybe not quite right. But there's I think, in terms of understanding where your solution should be going and making sure that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, you're getting the best return for all the clever stuff that we've got going on, I think it's the right thing to be doing. Whether the leakage is there, it's just in different places, it's debatable.
I prefer it's not there, if I'm honest.
The problem is you've then got to do all the customer engagement stuff to resolve the problem instead.
True.
So,
Jim, you can.
I wonder, particularly for Courtney, I wonder whether this had made you review use policy for AMR on the basis that that might offer additional insights.
Oh, AMR is great, but it's not smart metering, is it? I think we have quite good coverage. Well, it's probably not good compared to other companies, but I think we're over about 400,000 AMR meters. It's great, the data gives you an insight, but we don't get it in real time enough to be able to incorporate it into our leakage calculations and utilize it. I think smart metering is where we need to go in that direction.
Sorry, that's what I meant by AMR, smart metering.
Oh, yeah.
Real-time customer metering.
Yeah, sorry, we do have some meters, but they're not smart in the sense of providing real-time or near real-time data. So yes, we absolutely need to go in that direction. And it does feel like maybe we're behind the curve on that compared to some companies.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Neil, in the middle. Yeah. It was being hogged.
Yeah, just leave it with me.
Got it now.
Again, just as my question to Andrew earlier on was really around the wider sector, I apologise if this appears like it's in relation to your work and your company. It's definitely not. I guess the question it raises in my mind, sorry, Ian Pemberton from Ofwat again, is the water balance that's used for the leakage report, the certainty on each of those components, if you're then finding that level of consumption in those DMAs, what level of assurance do you then put to your colleagues who are then putting the other components of the water balance? And what's the implications of that?
I'm going to bring it to you. You want to answer this one?
I think so as I said to Steve's question, you've obviously got your top down and bottom reconciliation, which gives you confidence and stuff. It's about where that data actually sits. And then I think as an industry, we have household night use models that we don't like, you do your household night use model, but there's no kind of sense check on it. There's no auditing process really that says, you know what, actually that household night use is right. You've built it up from a relatively small sample, and then you've taken it up to a level. It's quite feasible that there might be a whole type of user that's just completely missing from that sample. So I think the way the Anglian Water guys described it was it's like an auditing tool. So once we've analysed all the DMAs, actually, you'll then be able to come back and say, well, this is how much household night use paradigm thinks is in your entire company. How does that match up to what your household model's giving you? We're we'd put together a 3-year club project because we're expecting that the answer might be paradigm's wrong. It might not be that the household night use model's wrong, but we're expecting there to be problems on both sides, and we can keep on developing that model and getting that right.
Yeah, thank
Very
you.
Good.
I guess it's a question and an appeal really is to make sure that your outputs become inputs to other colleagues in your organisations to make sure that it becomes learning for other parts of the water balance.
Yeah, important. Thank you very much. Another round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we're now going to move on to the last presentation in this series. I'm going to welcome up Tom Crowder, Director of Crowder Consulting, and Jason Pryor, Compliance Assurance Manager at Thames Water. And Tom and Jason are going to take us through their approach to targeting difficult DMAs with performance-based DMA reduction projects. Over to you, gents.
Thank you. Yeah, hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present. First time at the conference, and it's been very insightful. And look forward to seeing the rest of the presentations this afternoon. I'm just going to take you through the approach that Thames Water take in terms of DMA management, and then Tom's going to give you a bit more brief, more detailed presentation on how that's applied in the field. So in Thames, we've looked at the DMA management, setting up the DMAs, and we've gone through an enhancement program, an improvement program, and the leakage program. So in terms of the enhancements, it's looking at the DMA readers, the design of the DMAs. In terms of the improvement, it's looking at the data that's accurate in terms of the reporting element, and then the delivery in terms of the reduction, recovery, and reactive tasks that are done to deliver the leakage out in the field. So in terms of DMA enhancement, so we looked at all of our DMAs, and we've split them into good, okay, and poor kind of designs. We've got some parameters related to the number of meters that feed the DMAs, the property counts, and the econometry of pipes and the through flow. And we've identified 300 and, what's that number? 301 poor DMAs within the whole suite of DMAs within Thames, and we've allocated 76 of those to a redesign program that's part of the SAMP. So that will give us a scoring aligned with some industry sort of practice designs and distribution mains and feeds, and sort of the opportunity to maintain hydraulic flow and contingency planning by having good designs in the first place. Moving on to DMA improvement element. So we've got a simplified kind of view on this process because it is reasonably complex. So we look at the prioritising problematic DMAs. That's through a fingerprinting process where we analyse the data and we look at the operability and other measures. We perform the integrity checks to eliminate as the cause of an inoperable measure within the DMA. So that's doing validation and asset health checks, checking all the meters, checking all the flows, checking the boundary valves, and validating and correcting those as we go through. Then we start producing the residual overview to identify any points of interest related to the consumption and inoperable measures related to that. So we decipher those points of interest to determine some investigation points, which are across the orange sections there in the flow diagram. And then we look at those, and if we can't resolve them, then we go through and drill down a bit deeper into the process. But in terms of the issues, we look at the business areas to improve the undercount for water in that section. Just to illustrate, really, within Thames, we have the complex investigations. It takes 39 different tasks that involve 17 business areas to look at the problems that we've identified in terms of the operability and the consumption component of that. And we work diligently to try and resolve those with a small team looking at the specific DMAs that we've identified for the fingerprinting process. So I'm taking you through, well, not taking you through the fingerprinting process because that would take a bit longer, but we've just covered the bottom-up approach in terms of fingerprinting, the validation and the improvement element. And next we're looking at the leakage programs that we look to resolve some of the leakage that we've got after improving this data set. And that's the reactive kind of activity, the recovery and the reduction. And then what Tom's going to take you through now is the Lot 4 programs for specific targeted DMAs for leakage reduction. Before he does that, I shall just take you through the way we target for the Lot 4 programs is by establishing a DMA entry point. We look at the, let's get through these. So we look at the night line, we agree on night line. There's some analysis done in determining the night line through our governance processes. And in terms of the performance that we expect from the Lot 4 programs is a reduction performance. So the entry point is set, and we expect some natural rate of rise and some recurrence within that DMA. It's up to the incumbent service partners to manage that. And then their task is to reduce the leakage, reduce the night line by specific repairs, high quality repairs. And then we'll performance manage them in those reduction activities. And as I say, Tom will take you through details in terms of how he's performed in the field to deliver that. And at the end of the journey, however many leaks that are found, and the exit point is how we performance manage and pay those for those services. So over to Tom.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, so over the course of the last 2 years, we've delivered 8 performance-based leakage reduction projects for Thames Water. And we've done that with our strategic partner, WLLS, who we work closely with on the project. So we've reduced leakage by over 10 megalitres per day, and that's across 42 difficult DMAs, and we found 753 leaks. So we worked in London, Thames Valley, Guildford, so quite a variety of DMAs. We've got a dedicated team working on our DMA leakage reduction projects, and they're a multi-skilled team, and they've got the skills and the expertise to leverage the latest innovations in technology. So our team consists of a field team and then an engineering team. And the field team, they do the leakage detection, they do all the sectorization work on the network, the field testing, and the engineering team, they do all the planning, the organization, and the project management. So just to highlight what's different, well, the training goes beyond normal leak detection, and it's a different setup to a BAU team. And it's quite a small team as well. In terms of tracking leakage reduction performance, we produce a leakage reduction profile at the outset of the project, and that's what's used to track our performance on a weekly basis. So in the example below, we're aiming to achieve 4 megalitres of leakage reduction, and that's an average of 0.16 megalitres per day. So you can see the green line is our leakage reduction profile, and then the orange is our current performance for our current project at the moment. So we're delivering a leakage reduction against a set target. We're not aiming to hit a target number of leaks. It's about reducing leakage. In terms of achieving DMA leakage reductions, a proactive repair strategy needs to be put in place to prioritise leaks found and fix them quickly to achieve effective leakage reductions in difficult DMAs. So this has really been the hardest battle, and to be fair to Thames, they're really starting to get onto this now. But this is an ideal situation. So this is a real DMA. So you start with your entry point, repair a leak, get a nice saving, repair another leak, get a nice saving. You have a bit of, the leakage goes up a bit, but then you get another leak, then you get out. That's what it used to be. But what we've moved to now is more that we hold on to the DMAs, for a longer period of time. So to both reduce the leakage and then manage it at that level. So it doesn't just happen that we give it back and then it goes up. And the thing to note is that when you're doing these leakage reduction projects, not all leaks will reduce leakage. So they don't all contribute towards leakage reduction. We apply a smart investigation process for resolving difficult DMAs. So this is really just applying a structured approach to the leak detection. So we do the leakage analyst, we try and split the DMA up as much as possible. We manage the detection teams very closely, and then we predominantly use different types of noise loggers on the network, and then we schedule the follow-ups, and then we just repeat the process until we achieve the reduction that we're aiming for. And the thing to note really is it's a technology-driven approach. That's what we try and apply, is using the technology in the right way. As I mentioned, we try and split DMAs up as much as possible because we find that investigating confirmed volumes of leakage in smaller areas really motivates the team. If they know there's this much leakage in this area, they'll usually find it. Whereas if it's a big area and you say, yeah, it's got this much, then it's much harder for them. So we use various techniques to split up a DMA, but the moral of it is that we make the most of existing metering, and it's not just step testing. It's doing different things on the network to sectorize it and work out what the leakage is. All of our leakage detection activities are planned and tracked in NetOps, which is our web-based application built on top of NetBase, provisioned on a cloud platform. And we basically use NetOps to publish all the leakage activities to the field operatives and get their live feedback. So we basically plan, publish, get the feedback, and then we track the results. So no more out-of-date paper plans. We don't have any paper plans. And then all the key information is at their fingertips when they're doing a job, and also at our fingertips so we can manage and monitor the work. There's a range of leakage activities that we do. It's nothing groundbreaking, so it's all the usual types of activities, sounding, noise logging, correlating, investigating customer-side leaks, pinpointing leaks, and then raising repairs. But what we try to do is invest in the appropriate equipment and technology, and then enhance each activity to maximize the benefit. So just some examples of how we enhance each activity. So in terms of noise logging, to improve this process, we use IoT noise loggers, and this is especially in town centres. So we'll leave them in our DMAs while they're under our control. And what it gives us is visibility of the leaks. And then once they're repaired, we can make sure that it has been repaired and another leak hasn't broken out. So you can see there's the reduction from that leak when it was repaired. We also use an AMR meter when we're investigating customer-side leaks. So this will register flows at 1 minute intervals, and we can install them on boundary boxes, and we can also replace the existing meter for a night. And that just gives us certainty about, yeah, it is a leak, and we can quantify it. So it just gives you an idea of that. And then sounds obvious as well, but we do strategically plan the work to do some of the work at night, because it's just much more effective in town centres it's quieter, and they can usually find quite a lot of leaks in one night. And then finally, we use a high spec correlator on long sections of main, with larger diameters, just to pinpoint leaks there. And we also use hydrophones as well, where we need to. So just to give you a very brief case study. So this is a rural DMA, and in this DMA, we used existing metering to split it up, and we defined all of the areas, and in Thames they call them leakage control areas, and you might call them waste areas. And these are permanently set up, and then we identified that there was 350 meters cubed a day on this long section here. So then we kind of investigated it, and it's on effectively a trunk main, but it's within the DMA, a 7-inch main that goes from a treatment works to a storage reservoir. We installed an ultrasonic meter about a third of the way through, and we confirmed that the leakage was on the right-hand side. And then we used a high-spec correlator, and we were able to locate the leak, which is 50 meters from the storage reservoir. And then that's the leak where it was in the middle of a field. And then you can see the reduction once that leak was repaired. And that leak had been going on for 2 or 3 years, because obviously it's very difficult to find. And then finally, just an urban case study in North London. This is where we used a portable meter within a DMA to assess the level of leakage in a subsector. It logs flows every 30 seconds, enables you to assess the true value of leakage, and then we also log pressures at the same time at 30-second intervals. So you can see the setup there during the night. We were investigating a small industrial estate in North London to determine the leak location, and this just really shows what it looked like. So we closed the valves in sequence, and we didn't really get any drop, and then we closed a valve which was on a fire main that the normal detection services didn't really know about. When we closed that, we got a 7 litre per second drop, and in fact it was worth a lot more than that once repaired. So really, just to summarize, successful DMA leakage reduction projects requires an end-to-end management approach to sustainably reduce leakage and maintain lower leakage levels. So it's carefully selecting the areas, doing analysis and subdivision, so and having permanent monitoring, getting good feedback on the work, and having a structured process that you follow. And then I think most importantly, building the skills of your team, so they're multi-skilled and they're able to use the latest technology in the right way. That's it.
Well done, gents. So, any questions from the audience? Around those? I'll ask a question if there isn't. Just in terms of Thames, have you got sort of dedicated leakage teams that follow up on these sort of areas and sort of drive the performance in terms of the actual ultimate repairs?
In terms of repairs, following round. So we've got regional delivered repair activities going on in the restructure now. So it's all regional delivered, and some of these high priority programs like this, where they do a lot of quantification to identify what the leakage is, they're prioritising, and there's a dedicated R&M gang that follow them around.
Questions from Severn Trent to the fore again.
Thank you. I thought I'd beat Ian Pemberton to it. So, a couple of questions on there. Do you have to do much enabling work? So when you put in your temporary meters or your ultrasonics, do you have to put in pipe work in order for that to happen? Also, you talked about on your CSLs that you're able to take a meter out and put another meter in for a week, for a night, sorry. Does that cause any problems with the retailer in you doing that? Just wondering what your thoughts are.
So we do have to do enabling work. So in the example about the ultrasonic meter, Thames actually installed a chamber for us, but that was like an extreme case. Usually the enabling works involves just doing checks to make sure that everything's operational and valves are all working. Sometimes Thames will put a hydrant in for us so that we can set things up. But there is, and then on the meters themselves, often the waste meters themselves aren't working. So we have to kind of replace the inserts on them, get them all working, and prove that they're okay. In terms of replacing the meter, it's not like a common thing that we do, because it's not what's the right way to say it? It's not like often that we do that, but we sometimes will do it, but we'll obviously check that it's okay to do so first, because it's just for one night and then we put it back. But yeah, we won't do that often. It's sometimes the meter's not working, it's just stuck, like so we'll replace it and then put R1 in to measure it and then put the broken one back again.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Another round of applause. Thank you. Right. I'm going to jump back on Courtney and Stuart. There's a question that came in on Slido a bit late. Have you acted on the 67 DMAs where Paradigm states that there are household and non-household issues and not leakage? And has the analysis proved to be correct? Came on Slido.
We're still at the point where we're working through them at the moment. So we're very early on, as I said, in terms of our journey. What it's made us realise is that maybe we don't have the right kind of knowledge, documentation, training for some of our analysts to be able to delve into that data and be effective for those investigations. So we're probably at an enabling stage from that first set of results, so that when it comes to doing all of the DMAs, we can be successful and act on them. So we're probably a bit too early on to answer the question, unfortunately.
One of the things that have come out of it is we've had a series of sessions with the water companies over the year, and there's been a lot of concerns raised of, you get these outputs, how do you turn them into tangible benefits? So what we're doing as part of the project is putting together online training material. So we'll create a series of training modules that outline, this is what the DMA looks like, this is how DMA works, so from the basics to then, okay, you've got this type of problem, what are the steps you should go through to investigate it? How do you take that through to completion, to a point where you haven't fixed a leak, but actually you've identified a customer that's wrong and you've gone through the steps to correcting GIS or correcting billing.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I'm sure you'll all agree there's been some fantastic insight, but also great opportunities for collaboration and learning between all the different organisations. So thank you all so much for that. So we're now heading towards the last networking break of the day. Your chance to connect with those people on the table who you're sitting next to, who you probably don't know quite as well as you did earlier on if you'd followed the instructions. We're going to be gathering back here at 3:35, and the focus in the remaining session will be very much on the challenges of background leakage and customer side leakage. And please don't forget to fill in those feedback forms, because that's how we take learning from these sessions to hopefully make the next ones even more engaging and interesting for you. So see you back here at 3:35, and thank you once again to everybody who's presented. Thank you.